All right, welcome back, everyone. If this is your first panel of the day, welcome to the Recruitment Automation Conference, Diversity and Inclusion. For those who have been with us all day, welcome back to another great conversation. This is titled From Referrals to Retention, Looking Within to Leverage Your Workforce's Diversity. This should be an incredible conversation, a really great panel that we have here. So without further ado, I will introduce our moderator, Julie Sowash, who is the Executive Director at Disability Solutions, and also is a co-host with Torrin Ellis, Crazy and the King. So Torrin will be doing his last talk after this panel. So everyone get ready to finish the day strong over the next couple hours here. Without further ado, Julie, I will let you take it away and we'll go from there.
Yeah, so I'm already pumped up for Torrin. I'm getting out my rhubarb gin for his last fire of the day. And I'm excited to be able to take this last panel home. I do have the privilege of being a moderator, panelist kind of thing, so I'll jump in when I can. Definitely look forward to questions, and I'll try to catch those as they come in. As Dave said, my name is Julie Sowash, the Executive Director of Disability Solutions, and we're a national nonprofit. We help brands of all sizes build basically RPO for talent with disabilities and veterans with disabilities. We've helped clients, our client companies hire over 3,000 talented individuals with disabilities. I'm also the co-host of Crazy and the King, and I get to be the crazy because I am also a person living with a disability. I kind of own my label of crazy, but I live with multiple mental illnesses, and I'm excited to be here as both an employer and someone who helps build great systems, and also someone that you want to pull in as part of those referral programs. I'm going to start with Marilia for introductions, and then we'll jump into questions.
Sure. Thank you, Julie. I'm super excited to be here in this amazing conference. Yes, we are almost at the end, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be a great panel with my colleagues, Ivan and Orly. I work for CINT, a global digital solutions partner, for almost 18 years, so it's quite a long time. And I have a background in computer engineering, but my true passion is to work and advocate for diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I'm here to contribute on that with my whole experience and try to bring some insights and learn from the audience, Ivan, Orly, and of course, Julie too. Thank you so much. It's going to be great.
Thank you. Ivan, you want to take us next?
Sure. Yeah, I'm very excited to be on this panel and to learn from the collective wisdom in this room. I've done some work in diversity, equity, and inclusion for organizations like Apple and currently now at T-Mobile. And my background is in learning and development. So there's a lot of intersections between training, opportunities, behavior change, and how that is applied to making meaningful differences in diversity, equity, inclusion for organizations. Orly?
Thank you, Ivan. Wow, I am surrounded by a panel of amazing colleagues from Marilia to Ivan and Julie. Great to meet you all. I'm happy to be on this panel. So I am the head of global inclusion and diversity at Commvault. We're a global data management organization, cloud-based. And I've been doing diversity and inclusion for, I would say about 8 years now. So it is my passion. It is my bread and butter. It is something that to me never feels like work because it is the thing that I believe in. So we share that same passion, Marilia and Ivan. So I think this is going to be an amazing conversation. Lots of great collective thoughts, ideas, and best practices that I believe we're going to be sharing here today. So I'm really excited.
Awesome. Thank you. So let's just jump right in. So when you're working towards hitting your diversity hiring goals, how do you think about your existing diversity that you have within your organization? And how do you start to grow that within your existing teams before you start recruiting outward?
So I'll start. Okay. The first thing for us to do, I think, it's to know our audience. So we need to have the numbers. So we leave the perception out of the table and we bring the data to do our analysis and our informational decisions, inform our decisions. After we do that, we need to understand what are the aspects that are impacting or influencing the way that our team and our workforce were built. and then to work intentionally to change that a little bit within our own employees, our own audience, and then apply those insights and knowledge that we got from that analysis to our referral program, to our talent acquisition program, because these are the programs that will really change the numbers of our workforce. So that, I would say that's the start, to look for them, have the data, look for insights, and then apply the insights in your programs.
And to piggyback off of Marilia, which she's right on point. It's a journey that actually we're on at Commvault right now, and I'm the organization's first inclusion and diversity leader. And one of the things that I found was most important, and again, Marilia's already mentioned this, but there were 4 important steps in this process for us at Commvault. The first one was engaging. We have to engage our employees, engage our leaders, really get a sense for how the organization is feeling. Listen, I had a listening tour. I sent out a survey that was a global survey to really get a sense of how everyone was feeling. We're a global organization, and I wanted to ensure that we were inclusive in taking the consensus of our employees around the world. And then we brought the data. We looked at the data, we analyzed the data, and once we had the data and we saw those numbers, we then shared it with our senior leaders and share it with our hiring managers. And that was the accountability piece. And that's where we're at. We're at that accountability piece step where we now say, here's where we are. Here's what the organization said. Here's how we've engaged our employees. And now this is the data. Now we're going to make you as leaders accountable to ensure that the numbers or the areas where there is a disparity, that we make an effort to be more inclusive in those areas.
Ivan, anything you want to add?
No, that was perfect.
I have one thing to add, exactly what Orly said, that it's important then to share the data back to your senior leadership and to the actual decision makers, because it's a corporate effort, it's a collective effort to make the change. It's not our one department or one person that is going to change the whole structure of diversity of a company. So everybody must be involved, as everybody must understand the benefits and the goals that you're setting to your program. So sharing the responsibility is very important.
Absolutely. And just to say one other thing on that point, you just reminded me of something else. I think oftentimes organizations view the head of inclusion and diversity as sort of accountability person, right? So yeah, there is a sense of that, and there is a responsibility behind, yes, you've got to keep the organization and the leaders honest, correct? But I think the actual work starts at the senior leader level, and it's a top-down, bottoms-up, side-to-side approach to how we incur and how we weave the inclusion and diversity strategy, so that we're not just looking at HR, i.e. the inclusion and diversity leader, as the person responsible. It then becomes the responsibility of all of our employees, especially our executive leaders and our hiring managers, to ensure that that data is really, really taken into accountability, and that we're doing things, the right things, to be able to move the needle, in particular around those areas where the numbers are clearly disparate.
I completely agree with Orly that what I've seen in major organizations is that there needs to be an impetus from the leadership. Leaders set the tone.
Yes.
And then they need to provide an avenue for the employees to hold them accountable to the commitments that are made. So they set a tone saying, okay, this is important. This is what we're going to do. This is where we're putting our resources, and then provide avenues for transparency, for town hall meetings, for other ways to continue the conversation. So it's not just a flavor of the month or a flavor of the day kind of thing, that it's a continuous process of improvement, because the work never stops.
Yeah, and I would just add that we also need to hold our lower level leaders accountable. As that message comes down from the C-suite, what gets measured gets done, and that means hiring managers need to be accountable, and middle level leaders need to be accountable as well. Right, this is all fantastic points. We're starting to really understand where we're sitting from a diversity perspective, where we're doing great, where we're not doing so great. And then you start to think about how to leverage an employee referral program to take it to the next step. And Ivan, you mentioned specifically when we were kind of chatting for this session that really it can be a double-edged sword when you think about your employee referral program. Tell us what you mean by that.
I think that when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts that a lot of organizations are trying to lead, I think many of them are missing the mark. I think they are focused too much on the recruiting aspects and not focused enough on retention. So I think the primary driver needs to be, what are you doing for the existing people in your organization? What kind of policies and practices are currently in place that are hindering the diversity and the people that are currently at your organization to thrive? Because those exact policies and procedures are only going to hinder and kind of negate any investments you make in the recruitment process, right? It becomes like a turnstile, or not turnstile, walk in one door and walk out the other. And so I think the focus is on the existing diversity in the organization. How are you supporting them? How are you growing them as leaders? What is the promotion rate of minorities? What is the how transparent is the process of promotions? All those things are now widely available. All those details are widely available on Glassdoor, on Blind, on all the information about how the culture is at your organization is commoditized. And so unless your current employees can speak on your behalf, it's only going to harm your recruiting efforts. And so that's why I say it's a double-edged sword. If your current employees, maybe even middle-level managers at senior management and direct level, they say, hey, there's a glass ceiling. Hey, there's a bamboo ceiling for me. I was only able to get to this level in the organization. If you have strong potential and aspirations, don't join this organization because they won't support you. That's what they're gonna blast on social media, or it's gonna be shared by word of mouth. So it really starts with retention programs.
Okay.
And
go ahead.
Sorry, to add on what Ivan said is exactly true. It has to be true from within, right? And everything that you do in your intentional programs for diversity, equity, and inclusion inside the corporation should be properly marketed to the external audience, to the public, not only to make you look good, but to make, of course, other people know what you're doing. And with that, as Ivan said, you will be able to keep your people in. So the everyday decision to stay within the company will be easier because they will feel more safe. They will feel the more collaborative environments that you're going to create. And not only they will decide to stay, but they will be able to refer the company to their friends, telling exactly, please come, you're gonna love it, and then not referring to their similars or to their peers, but also helping the company even increase the numbers of diversity, equity, and inclusion, because they will know that this is a safe environment for the different. So they will bring different people to your company too. So truly true what you said, Ivan, and everything will help the sustainability of the business, not only your numbers for inclusion and retention, but the company itself.
And just to add to that, another one important component, I stress this and I say this quite often when I speak either to our senior level managers or executives, is that your employees are the lifeline of your organization, right? We know that, right? So yes, revenue matters, but your employees, they are your number one asset, right? And I think that's why when I started at Commvault, one of the things that I said, three things: I engaged, I listened, went on a listening tour, and then looked at that data, right? And they were all together. Part of that engagement piece is really your employee resource groups, right? So when I started the employee resource groups at Commvault, one of the very important things that I charged our ERGs with in our model was to ensure that we were tying and aligning ourselves to all of those important pillars within human resources, within the business, and with the executive leadership in terms of their overall goals, right? So when we think about the importance of, yes, hiring, right? And we want to be able to bring in top talent. We want to be able to be inclusive of diverse top talent as well. We have to think about how our employees are being engaged. So employee resource groups are one. They're great for referrals. They're great for bringing in. They are the ambassadors of your organization. And they're doing this because they love the organization and because they love being a part of something that makes sense, that perhaps is an affinity to them, right? And thirdly, when we think about development programs, who better to test a development program with if not an ERG, right? So our ERGs are there to truly be a resource to the organization. And I think oftentimes we forget how much they are a value to an organization and how much they can drive and change or drive impact rather in an organization. So I always say our employee resource groups, they are the lifeline and the core of your inclusion and diversity strategy when thinking about hiring, developing, retaining, and even going out to our community and also for our partners and our stakeholders. So they're an important lifeline that we should always tap into.
Yeah, I think that those are all great points, and really relying on our ERGs as a business resource, but also as a what's in it for me? Why am I going to join this ERG if I can't have a opportunity to grow, right? To raise up that bench is a great business aspect, but it's also a great reason for someone to become a part of a group that does more than just represent the office and the community, but represents how that community grows within the office.
Absolutely.
No, this is fantastic information. And I think, one question that we've seen here is, are there tools that help you manage bias within the referral system?
Well, what I would add is not specifically to the referral system, but to the actual hiring process, because you have to apply that in every decision of hiring a new person within the company. In fact, some of the tools are applied even for any decision that you have to make, like promotions, reassignments, and performance evaluations, because these tools will help you to leave the bias out, to have more clear criteria, and to have a very thoughtful decision based on skills and experience, not based on any other personal characteristic that a person might have. So for that could be applied for referrals, but it's also one of the first things that people mention about the hiring process is hiding some personal information, name, if you have any other that will connect with gender or ethnicity or anything else. If the person wrote anything of those personal characteristics on their application, you should hide, and you should focus specifically on experience and skills. Sometimes they even hide backgrounds on colleges and other studies, because that might be some bias involved on that, affirmation bias connect to that. But these are at least the most common thing that I see when talking about techniques or tools to improve the process of removing bias on referrals and talent acquisition.
I think one other tool that I've found is important, and it's something that we're delving into more and more at Comball as we look at augmenting our hiring processes, creating that diversity pipeline. We're also being very conscientious about providing our hiring managers the right kind of training. I think training as a tool to our managers to help de-bias, and I think Marilia just hit just that very point, de-biasing that process, not just the way that they look at a resume, but when they actually are interviewing someone who doesn't look like them, and how to change that mindset from well, this isn't the person I would normally hire. This person doesn't quite look like me. And you're not thinking that per se, right? But unconsciously, that's what the brain is doing. It's making a correlation between this person doesn't quite look like me. They don't have the same experiences. We're not part, we didn't go to the same schools. We don't, run in the same circles. So debiasing that process, understanding and identifying when it's happening so that we can quell those kind of thoughts and those biases, that unconscious biases that come at us when we're dealing with someone that is completely different from who we are, right? And whether that's speaking to someone who's on the spectrum, speaking to someone who is, or interviewing someone who's LGBTQ, or someone who is Black or Latinx, right? So ensuring that we have the right kind of tools so that our managers know how to manage that conversation, i.e. a relationship, post that interview so that we can have a successful hire, also helps once the person or once the individual, the candidate has been hired, to maintain that relationship and knowing how to deal with someone who is not of the same diversity strand as us, but yet brings forth the kind of skills that will help elevate the conversation and also help the bottom line of the organization. Because as we know, diverse teams really are more profitable in an organization than homogenous ones.
And I'm reading the chat box, and I like to double click on, I think, what Glenn Cathy was commenting about what kind of tools are available to change the culture. And I think a lot of that has to do with transparency in the processes and procedures for promotion, for example. Do the people know what kind of conversations are had in the back room when people talk about succession planning and the talent pipeline? Now, make that transparent. Competency models, make it very clear that there's, of course, different job levels naturally in large organizations, and make it very clear that what are the competencies that people need to hit in their role in order to advance to the next stage. All those things can be clearly spelled out as part of the paper, not the paperwork, but the guidelines and the documentation that you have in HR. So there's a lot of culture change is about taking. You have to make it into policies because you have to make it official, but then you have to have enforcement and people practicing the policies, and the combination of the policies and practices will transform the culture.
I think you guys make a really good point, and something I think that I've heard a lot today, and I've heard a lot at a lot of the TA conferences I've been at lately, is too many people are looking for that set it and forget it solution when it comes to technology, and technology is not going to fix our bias problem or our culture problem. And so when you're thinking about implementation of tools or even programs and policies like you were mentioning, Ivan, how often do you go back to kind of the core strategy and the core data and say, now we need to recalibrate? We've made strides here, we've fallen back here, and then evaluate the tools that you use from a technology perspective based on that information. Anyone?
Yeah.
Orly, you want to start?
I would probably say I'd look at it quarterly, right? I think a look at our data quarterly will give us a really good perspective as to how we're moving along, right? And so I am now having conversations with our leaders. We've revealed the data, and so now we're sitting with each of our businesses, our main businesses, to say, hey, here's what's happening. And from a quarterly perspective, I sit with our human resources business partners and with our leaders to say, hey, here's what happened last quarter. Here's where we are this quarter. And here are the incremental changes, if any, or here's where we're still flat, or here's what we should be looking for by end of year or by end of quarter, right? So it's not so much to set goals or quotas, but it's to keep that accountability focus at the forefront, because I think you're absolutely right, Julie. I think some of the tools and AI can help to a certain extent. And let's not forget that AI can also be biased in that those who create the tools, if they're biased, they're implementing their bias into those tools. So, it's a double-edged sword. So I would say go to the basics. Dig down to your data and look at it quarterly, and really have the courageous conversations with your leaders to say, hey, it's still looking staunchy, or there's been no movement, or how can I help you so that there is more movement? What's happening, right? Dig into the questions that perhaps they just haven't really thought about because they haven't seen the numbers, or they're not looking at the numbers as consistently as D&I would, or TA would, or learning and development would be looking at them.
Yes. Yeah, I think we should say AI can be biased in every single conversation you're in ever. I tried to. Please do so also. Go ahead, Maria.
No, it's just to connect everything. I think it was Ivan that said before that we are constantly learning, and in order to improve our processes and to make sure that people understand the numbers and the technologies involved in all this, there are some things that we can even wait less to check the numbers, to validate some of the suggestions that we're making and applying to change the numbers. But most of it is the courage to pivot and to acknowledge that, oh, this didn't work. Let's try something different. Sometimes we get too attached to some of the suggestions that we have, some things that are close to our hearts, but to be humble enough to know that there are so many things that we don't know. There are so many things like intersectionality that are create different layers of complexity on this diversity, equity, and inclusion world that is too impossible. It's impossible to have a silver bullet that will fix everything. So the courage to change, the humbleness to learn and to pivot at any time that is necessary.
Something that I've seen work at some other organizations is, especially in the ethical leadership space, when something has not occurred well, maybe somebody was caught doing sales fraud, or taking bribes, or whatever it was. I've seen organizations publicize that information to the entire organization. Last month we caught this person doing this. This is what happened. They were fired. This was a discipline that occurred. And publicizing that information drives the message of what are acceptable and unacceptable behaviors for the organization. It's even though that is pretty progressive, most companies don't do that because of a legal risk and exposure, or perceived at least. But the companies that do that, they understand that they need to set the tone. And I wonder if that same kind of transparency and boldness can be applied to biases in the recruiting and retention process, right? Wouldn't it be amazing? I haven't seen this yet, but wouldn't it be amazing if a company, on the next town hall meeting or newsletter came out and said, last month we ignored X percentage of qualified candidates due to bias. That was a mistake. Let's do better. Let's change that. Moving forward, we have instituted slating requirements. We have instituted all these different tools, and so somebody in the comment section asked, is there software that removes that automatically removes names from resumes? Yes. Is there software that you can feed in a job description and it will tell you what kind of leans the words have? Is it a more aggressive lean, or is it a more whatever it is? And then you can adjust that job descriptions to attract a wider slate of candidates. Even the words in the job description matter. So yes, I don't remember the names of those tools, but they are available and they are out there.
And I think as the things that you're talking about are very process driven, right? Which is incredibly important. You need to take your culture and your values and implement it into your process. And we can train leaders and hiring managers to recognize bias, and we can solicit behavior through our incentives and those kind of things to minimize that behavior. But what we can't do is remove bias without changing the hearts and minds about how people feel about people with disabilities, about women of color, about LGBTQ individuals. And that really takes that culture shift. And I think that the tools and things that are available, they start to create the environment, and the transparency, Ivan, that you speak to, start to create the environment where that culture can start to change. But it's really only through inclusive leadership and inclusive engagement with the community that we're really going to see that bias start to be truly mitigated. And that leads me to something that's very close to my heart, which is, intersectionality. So I'm a person with a disability. I happen to be a white, straight woman with a disability, which comes with its own set of privileges and challenges. And it's important for me to recognize how I can lift the voices of other people with disabilities who are of a different race, gender, ethnicity, religion. And so it's becoming a bigger part of our conversation. And I'm curious if any of you are seeing how that has evolved within your organizations, how you're managing it and leveraging it to help individuals and your team see that no one's a single issue human being, and how you're going to make sure that, I think especially with like ERGs, Orly, you mentioned how to recognize that opportunity for interaction and engagement with a different diversity group maybe they're not focused on.
Well, you hit it right on the nose, Julie. And that's exactly what was top of mind is employee resource groups. You can start there. For me, our ERGs is, LGBTQ and allies, women in technology and allies, right? So we've got to create a community of allyship. And I think it starts with allyship. And the only way we do that is by creating a community that stands side by side with another strand of diversity. And that's how we create levels of intersectionality. So our ERGs, I call them my ERG community. And I have part of the organizational structure that I've designed for them is to also have them do cross-functional events together. So I'll say, great, you have your events, women in technology, LGBTQ, the veterans have your own events, multicultural, but I want to see more of that intersectionality coming to fruition, because in each of the strands, we have people that sit at every one of those levels. In each of those ERG groups, we have people who sit at every diversity strand level, whether it's visible or not. And so creating an opportunity for your ERGs to really feel like a community, to really feel like they're not just working in silos, but they're working together to move not just their own agenda, but the agenda of the other diversity strands is just as important. And also they will help with, again, they're the advocates, they're the champions of the organization. They're going to champion their voices and the thing that makes them come alive in their ERG, but they're also going to begin to then champion their fellow allies. So it's important to have them sort of have that cross-functional opportunity to work with each other, to not work in silos, and to also represent strands that are not like their own.
Perfect. What I was going to add is, after you create those very strong groups, how do you leverage their voices within the company to make really more strategic change and touch the hearts of people on the top of our pyramids, on the top of our companies? So what has been working for us at CI&T is to create those internal events where the people from the ERGs and from the diverse groups, they tell their own stories to our senior leaders, to our executive members, so they can understand how these people are impacted inside the job, outside the work, and create this personal connection of their stories. With that, you start creating, as Ivan also said about transparency, how do you bring all this information and all those stories to really change not only the subject of diversity, equity, and inclusion to the company as a priority, but as a value, as something that will drive decisions from now on. And then all the team members, all the people at the company will be more connected to that. It will be easier to talk to this subject because for some people it's still a very sensitive subject. So I will just bring more light and power to the ERGs and ask them to tell their stories internally.
And just one more thing about empowering ERGs. I think at a lot of organizations, I think there could be more investment in the programs. So for example, some of the best practices I see are two things. One, ERGs need a budget. They need to be funded so that they can pay for events and books and other material that's needed to maintain a thriving community. So a lot of it has to do with food, of course. Food brings community. So that's a one big thing that I think most companies don't fund their ERGs and have a structure for them. So including like chairs and committee members and things like that. So I think it's very important to structure the ERG program in such a way that it's sustainable with leadership. And the second thing that's really helpful is to fully involve ERGs in the recruiting process. So at Apple, for example, the group for African Americans and black people was called, I think, African American Association at Apple, or Blacks at Apple, and that group was involved in the recruiting process at historically black colleges, for example. So directly connecting the ERGs, giving them an active role in the recruiting process is very empowering.
And to that, I would just also say is, again, accountability from the top of the house and middle management. And what we have done at Commvault and what I've done in previous roles as head of diversity and inclusion is make sure that our senior leaders are involved in everything our ERGs do. So they sit as executive sponsors for our ERG groups. They also sit as creating political clout for the ERG. They also help to mentor. They also help to move the needle around the topics that the ERGs perhaps don't have the political clout or how to navigate and use their political network. So our executive leaders really are the ones that help set the tone to help mobilize our employee resource groups and all of the great work that they are already charged to wanting to do throughout the organization.
So we have 1 minute left, and we have one really great question from the audience that I really want to get in. And it's from Anna Marie. It says, we're a 50-person startup. ERGs are pretty small. How would you take these recommendations and apply them to smaller companies? That you can answer in a minute.
I love that question. I think there's always an opportunity to start with your ERGs. Maybe if you're a 50-company organization, you can create one group of ERGs instead of creating several ones. Create an ally community. It could be called, it could be an acronym of women, LGBT, and, abilities or veterans. Figure out what your population is, this 50 people. If there are more women, if there, if there are people who are veterans, try and get that data first from your HR leaders, and then figure out how to create one community that then has a structure that one pillar is for women, another pillar is for multicultural, another pillar is for veterans, another pillar is for abilities. And there you have one community of an ERG group that's doing it all and doing it together. So there isn't this siloed thing happening. They're working together as one community.
Just to add that's what happened even in the big company as CINT. We started as one group just to keep the ball rolling and to bring attention to how things would work. And then after, we started breaking into ERGs in more smaller and focused groups.
Ivan, anything to take us home with before Dave joins us?
I really love this discussion, and I would challenge the group to speak up to their organizations about improving the culture through policies, practices, and especially focused on retaining the existing talent that's in the organization, in addition to focus on talent acquisition.
Perfect.
Awesome. So I'm ready to get my rhubarb gin and check out Torrin's next session. And Dave is here to wrap us up. Thank you all so much. This was awesome.
Thank you.
Awesome. Marilia, Orly, Ivan, Julie, thank you so much. This was fantastic. So we have what I think will be a really special end of the day here. In just a few minutes, if you click on the session stage, that is where Torrin's Q&A session is going to happen. It will actually be interactive, so you can ask questions in the chat. You can also ask to share your audio and video if you want to hop on stage and ask Torrin directly. We're going to have a farewell address from Drew Austin, Wendy's CEO. And then at 5 p.m. Eastern, we are going to have travel writers from all over the world, from Serbia, from Vienna, Austria, from Tijuana, Mexico, take you into their homes, show you around, tell you about life in their cities. It should be really fun way to kind of wind down together. But before that, we have such a powerful thing planned for you in the next few minutes. So I strongly urge everyone to head over there. Just a couple final programming shout outs. We are still matching donations to Code 2040, an incredible organization working towards racial equity in technology and the innovation economy. Those details are posted in the main event and stage chats. Additionally, this has been an incredible day so far. If you would like to commemorate it with a free t-shirt, those links are also in the main chat. The t-shirts are beautiful. We worked really hard with the Seek Out team to put those together. So thank you very much to Seek Out for organizing that. Check that out. Otherwise, we'll see everybody in the session stage in just a few minutes. A really powerful thing is waiting for you on the other side of this, so I can't wait for everyone to see you there. And in the meantime, enjoy. And we'll see you in just a few minutes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.